Welcome, Drink with James, episode 198. We are still in quarantine, but I am in New York City. I don't actually need the mask. I'm back in New York. We came back from Florida on Monday. Flying was wild. I'd say the airplanes were 20 or 30% full. The airport was completely empty. Honestly, I felt safer flying than I do going to Whole Foods. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone travel, obviously, but it was good to get back to New York, good to get back to my routine. And, you know, as I said last week, we're kind of shifting from this mode of, thinking very much about what is happening now and how to react to it, to starting to think about what's the next few months look like and what should you be doing to prepare for the new reality that we're going to be entering, and or what should you be focused on and spending your time on now. The things that we used to talk about, how to network using events, how to get meetings with brands, those things are all different now, and they will be different for quite some time. And so we're going to try and start to talk to you all about the next 90 days and what that looks like. So today, instead of answering questions, I wanted to talk about a couple things that I have been thinking about. I do a lot of my thinking on the bike. I try and ride my bike every morning. Honest, quarantine's kind of screwed up my schedule a little bit. Now that I have, my days are not as full, especially my nights aren't as full. I've actually been exercising in the evenings a little more than I used to. Mostly to stop me from starting to drink at 4 p.m. and then just going through the rest of the night. At least if I exercise from 5 to 8 p.m., I block out a few hours there where I can not be drinking Negronis. But I was on a bike ride and I generally just let my mind kind of wander. I don't go into the ride kind of with a goal as far as what I'm thinking about. And I try to get to a place where my mind just kind of floats around. And I was thinking about how I used to be able to see the world through my camera. I literally could walk around the city and I was seeing the world as the photographs that I could take. And that wasn't just a thing I could turn on. That was always, right? When I left my apartment every morning, the thing I was focused on was taking photos. And after a while, it was the literal lens in which I saw the world. And so every interaction I had with the world, with the people I met, with my friends, with my job, whatever it was, I was experiencing that almost through a camera. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about what is it that makes compelling content, right? And most of the time, if you're a photographer, we'll say, speaking this, it is vision, right? It's people talk about a good eye. They have a good eye, right? Meaning they see the world in an interesting way. They're able to look at a thing that maybe you look at every single day, and they see it in a way that is different than you see it. But once they show it to you in that way, it changes the way you see it, right? This has happened to anybody that's been through a breakup and goes back and listens to sad songs, and then you think, oh my gosh, this song is written for me. That is the literal thing that I'm experiencing is being talked about in this song. And they have put it in a way that I could have never explained it myself, but is absolutely perfect. That's vision, right? But generally, when people talk about vision, it is something that I think people feel is you're born with. It's like a talent, a God-given talent, if there was a God. But I don't think that is totally true. As I've said before, I'm not an artist. I don't think that I'm, necessarily super talented when it comes to the arts. But I do think that with enough discipline, you can build vision. So how do you do that? I think that the foundation of vision is observation, right? The ability to observe the world, right? And that is something that you can work on. You can get better at observation. And so as we kick off this series and as we think about the next few months, I wanted to let's think about the most basic thing, which is how can you create more compelling content? Well, okay, you need to develop vision. How can you do that, right? Get better at observation. How can you do that? How do you get better at observation? I think there's a few ways. I think that it is like anything you're trying to get good at, it's good to try and build some structure into it, and think about giving yourself little assignments. You could carry a journal around or just use your notes app and say that I'm going to write down 5 things today that I noticed. It could be anything. It could be, a description of a person that you saw on the street that you thought was really compelling. It can be, what it looked like when a storm rolled in. It could be the way something made you feel. It could be really anything. But I think giving yourself assignments and forcing yourself to kind of dive into these things, and even if you're not a writer and you don't have a huge interest in becoming a better writer, I think diving, like forcing yourself into things, forcing yourself to observe moments on a kind of higher level will make you better at anything that you want to do creatively. And I just don't think there can be creativity without observation. And I think that it's something that's generally not talked about. I think why I've been on this is I tried to talk to you guys. I read this book, Outline, by Rachel Cusk. And I'm trying, if anybody knows her, I'm trying to get her to come on Drink with James. We've sent a note to her publisher, but I haven't heard back. So if anyone knows Rachel, please let me know, because I'd love to have her on the show. In this book, she's teaching a writing class in Greece, and she gives an assignment to the students and just says, like, describe something from your walk in this morning. And they write these big things, and it was amazing how, like, a little thing, right, the way a swing set was swinging on the way in reminded them of when their parent, when they used to go to the playground with their parents and all these things, right? And it's just like, I think you do have to force yourself into that. I'll give one more quick example. Like during quarantine, you guys know I enjoy writing. I think I'm, decent at it. And my girlfriend said, like, I was feeling super stressed out. She was going to cook dinner that night. And she was like, I'm going to give you an assignment. Go write something about time. And I was like, what? That's kind of weird. She's just like, yeah, just take an hour. Here's like a cheese plate and a Negroni. And like, your assignment is to write about time. And it was an interesting, again, it was just like an interesting process for me to be given that assignment. And I ended up with something I thought was kind of interesting. But I would have never thought critically about time for an hour and how to explain it without that assignment, right? And I think it goes back a bit to like what Quigley does, where she writes her captions the week before she takes the photos. Like, step back and think about the things in the world that you want to dig into, that you want to, be better at observing, and force yourself to try and become better at observations. I do think that is the first step to better content. And I think for a lot of people, like, again, like for most influencers, if they think about like, where they're at, and they look back of like, how long have I been doing this? If not running an Instagram, you could have had a blog before. Like if you are, a lifestyle influencer, right? You can think like, okay, I've kind of been talking about this stuff and doing this for 7 years, right? And I've gotten to this point where I'm like, I feel like I understand what I'm doing. I'm good at it, right? And you want to keep pushing that, but then you're going to start something totally new. And the problem is like, you want to be just as good without the 7 years. And you had so much passion about, whatever it is you talk about, beauty, lifestyle, travel, photography, yourself, whatever, do you have the passion to like get to that point, right? Like, again, for me, I wasn't passionate enough about photography to keep it going, right? Like now, and part of it was like, I started this company, and like now what I want to do is be like a world-class CEO, right? And like, I love that. That gets me out of bed every day. I've been doing it now for 7.5 years. And I'm learning every day and I have no interest in stopping. And I could see myself doing this for decades, right? But I feel like I finally found something that like I can keep throwing myself into, and I'm passionate enough about that I can get through the shitty times, right? It was my example I've said before on the show, which was that like Ira Glass said that it took him 15 years to make radio that he thought was good because his taste level is so much higher than his ability level for so long, that it took him 15 years to be able to create something that he felt like he could be proud of. And that's a hard thing to say, but I think a lot of people feel that. Another example is Rolling Stones. They didn't put an original Rolling Stones song on an album until their fourth album because their first goal was to be the best blues band in the world, right? And they were playing covers. And then they started writing songs and they thought the songs were shit. They were like, sappy love songs. And so they sold them to other artists, but they refused to put one on the album because they felt they couldn't write songs good enough for the Rolling Stones until 4 albums in, right? And so I think that like I talk about, observation and this idea of embracing being an amateur. I think that to get to the point you want to get to, like you have to have that passion to make it through the really hard years. And it is much harder to be learning in public, right? When you had no followers and you were publishing stuff and, 200 people were looking at it. It's much easier to make mistakes then. It's much easier to put embarrassing things out that you weren't that great. It's much harder to do that as an influencer, but like it is as someone with a following. But I do think it is, it's essential that you continue to push yourself and you continue to keep pushing the line out to where you want to be. And I really think like, if you don't wake up and feel that, if you don't wake up and feel like, I want to be better at this, not I want to make more money or I want a bigger following, but like I want to be better at this today, then you probably don't have the passion and you probably never will get there, right? Again, Jamie Beck was just on the show, but like, look at her still lifes from 3 years ago when she moved to Provence versus now. And it is like, it's so different, right? And she was already so good. Like she got to be such an incredible like fashion editorial photographer. And then she just like stopped and started taking pictures of roses, And initially they weren't great. She had to learn styling, prop styling and different lighting techniques and Photoshop and all these things, right? And like 4 years later, you're now seeing the fruits of that labor and she's still pushing herself. But that's passion, because if all she wanted was a bigger following, she probably like would have just kept doing what she was doing. I don't think that the advice of like, whatever you're passionate about, that should be your job. Like, I don't necessarily think that that's really very realistic advice for a lot of people. But for influencers, the way you guys are operating, like this is a creative endeavor. It should be a reflection of yourself and you have to transfer your excitement for something to somebody else. And to do that, you have to be passionate. And, you have to be able to get through the tough years to get to the place you want to be. So I think, while we are in this time when everyone is feeling more anxious and things are uncertain and we don't know if, where our next paycheck is coming from, all these things are true. And I've talked about how I'm struggling creatively in this time because I just find that it's very difficult to be creative when things are uncertain. But there is less busyness in our life, for most people. Hopefully you're fortunate enough where like you don't have as, events, dinners, all these things that like a traditionally an influencer would be doing, you're not doing it. And you can dedicate yourself to becoming better. And I think, starting with honing your observation skills and accepting being an amateur are two great steps to walking down that path. So we're going to keep talking about this stuff over the coming weeks and months. We're going to be bringing in experts from different fields to talk to you guys as well. But as always, we need your questions, and feel free to DM us, comment, email us, whatever it might be. Thank you guys for listening. Cheers.